there was always something a little bit different about this gentleman. He was ballyhooed and clutched to the bosom of new wave of British heavy metal fans because he was part of Gillan. And yet, he didn't really conform to that. I'm talking about Bernie Tormé. Because although he was part of the Gillan band, his solos were more agitational, spikier, a bit punkier, folks. And his attire was, there were no Ian Gillan big headbands, bandanas and that kind of thing, and roomy denims, nothing like that. There was, sharper, skinnier suits, and I can't remember if there were any skinny ties, but there was certainly earrings and that sort of thing, and a bit of a rooster, bouffant rooster cut thing in the hair department, if I remember rightly, which was more new wave. He was there during the early, well, not the early Gillan band days, that's different. I think he was there for Clear Air Turbulence. I could have a look, but I can't be bothered. But I knew he was there for, the albums that people regard as, or new wave British heavy metal fans regard anyway, as the big Gillan albums. And he left citing, and people report this, money concerns about being paid and all of that, and how much he was being paid. Don't know if that was the case. That's what I've read many times. Around the time, his last album was If Tomorrow Is the Day Before We Think It Is, Are We Doing What We've Done Before? Future Shock. Is it the Future Shock? And he wasn't on Double Trouble, although he's on some of the live stuff. Yannick Gers came in to replace him. Yes. Small world, isn't it, the rock music world at this time. And he'd strike out on his own. So the thing about Bernie Tormé is that this first album that I'm going to talk about came out in 1982 on Camouflage with a K. Wasn't a big event. It wasn't, oh my God, we must hire a barge and go down the Thames, Sex Pistols, and have a look at that, and have a big party with candelabras and dancing and all that. No, there's nothing like that, I don't think. And I remember this coming out at the time and thinking, don't quite know, because he straddled the worlds of classic rock and new wave. New wave, at this point, of course, is more like, let's stop this gobbing on each other with punks and jumping up and down and pogoing. Let's get something that can go on top of the pops. All right, we'll put up a couple of punk bands on there. The Ruts can go on there. We'll have Jimmy Percy and Sham 69. Look who's on top of the pops again. We'll have that, and then what we'll have is more of at one kind of end of new wave, we'll have the Jam, who could be quite frightening, and then we'll have at the other end bands like the Vapors, who are not frightening at all. So they can go on top of the pops, can't they? And we call that new wave. Now, I don't know if it happened like that. It's probably more organic, but it seems to me as a jaded hack that it did happen that way. And I loved new wave at the time. Because, of course, you've also got Ian Jury around with Blockheads, and you've also got Elvis Costello. So it is a wider, I'm necessarily truncating it. It is a wider movement than that. But certainly I think that Bernie Tormé straddles both camps. And so does this album. You got Phil Spalding on here doing bass and all sorts of things, actually. Mel Gaynor is on drums. Later, he was at this point, this is 1982, so it's at the end of all that kind of new wave period, really, or towards the fizzling out of it. Mel Gaynor, he's already in Samson, having replaced Thunderstick for the 81, certainly Reading appearance, and this is. It wasn't ballyhooed at the time, and I can understand why. It's neither one thing nor the other. It's also not really fantastically well done. First of all, let's talk about the guitar solos, which of course you're going to want to do with Bernie Tormé, aren't you? And they are agitational, and they are sharp, and they are sometimes very lilting. First track in, Turn Out the Lights, which is the title of the album, although it's blues rock and it's got a blues rock bass and a pulse, and it does sound like a Gillan track, a kind of Gillan filler track, sadly. It's got a simple chorus and a gob iron in it. It's wailing away, that gob iron, doing the harmonica mime, the universally regarded mime for a harmonica. There you go. And that solo, though, cuts against it. It's really lilting, actually. There's an ominous piano at the end as well. I think Colin Towns was on this, wasn't he? If I remember rightly. But really, the guitars are tougher, and you've got new wave toughness in the version of Painter Man. I mean, it's flashier than the original, rockier than the original. It's tough, and I rather like it. I quite like the punky. I've got some notes down here. You see, the punky, pushy, harmonica heavy lies. I like that, and I like the really sharp and spiky and cheap cider and fags solo that Bernie gives it. I do like the troubadour rock ballad feel of getting there. They are getting there till about halfway through, and it becomes an enormous, in the chorus actually, it's almost an explosion. I didn't see the explosion, but I heard that, yes, it's there now. You know, it's suddenly there, a big rock ballad, enormous in that chorus. We do have a bit of Top of the Pops. Top of the Pops, Populars with the Populars for Possession. It's got that tighter new wave, but it's not scary feel. And India is kind of an incidental thriller music, film music, you know. It's got a sweet acoustic. It's got some kind of all-encompassing synths, blanketing synths. It's all right, but actually, I'm thinking, hang on a minute, was that a flute? Bring it back. It's just as it fades out. I think that's Colin as well, actually. I think if I remember rightly, I could go and look that up, but I can't be bothered. So I want that to come back because I want a bit more flute in there, actually. It sounded more interesting. And then we've got Oh No, which is the end of the original album. It's come out and been remixed in 2023 several times. It's got several, there have been other tracks on it, but this is the end of the original album. And it is really spiky. And it's got a real shouted chorus, but it's almost a bit of art pop, angular art pop, which of course you'll be getting with a bit of Bauhaus and that kind of thing. You'll be getting all of that. And you also get that commercialised around Blitz Kids, you know, with the nightclub and all that. You'll get all of that coming in. It's got a very bare verse in this, but with a huge solo to play us out. It's questing all over the place. It doesn't quite know where it wants to be. And that's the way I feel about this album, he said, segueing nicely. It doesn't feel as though it knows where to place itself. And I felt that way about Bernie Tormé in Gillan as well. I didn't mind then, but this album really, really shows that he's not a rocker, he's not a punker, he's not a new waver. He's all of those things. Not new waving, but perhaps drowning. I should have ended with that, shouldn't I? But I'm not going to, because I think that although I like this album, some of the songs are a little bit unmade. I mean, the vocals from Bernie are not great, has to be said. They are a bit pub rock, to be honest. That was another movement that was around at the time, remember? Sort of late 70s into the 80s. This is a bit late for that new wave stuff. So he sort of missed out on that as well. And listening back right now and remembering what people thought at the time, it just fell between probably a shop full of stools. I'm not quite sure what it wants to be. And whilst it's an interesting oddity, and it is a new wave of British heavy metal oddity, not quite sure anybody would big it up. Certainly I wouldn't. Turn out the light. Make sure you're not the last one to leave this ship. There'll be a lot more albums to come, but lights out for this one. Ta-ta.